Now, when she came and met with Kahana, she wasn't alone. She came with another man, another Israeli parliamentarian. I don't know if any of you recognize the man she's standing with here. This is Yitzhak Shamir, who later went on to become Israel's prime minister. And, these two, were colleagues from the Knesset, but they know each other decades earlier. I don't know if you'd followed, but back in the day, they were both members of the Lehi, one of the underground movements, the Jewish terrorists who operated in British Palestine. In the 1930s and 40s, they would, attack Palestinian targets and British targets in order to drive the British out of the country. And so Shamir and Geula Cohen, they come to the US and they meet with Kahana, and start him on this path, but they also give him the tools to do so by introducing him to Amichai Paglin. And who was Paglin? And this is the man who was the chief bomb maker of the Irgun. Right? He was responsible for the bombing of the King David Hotel, and all the people that died in it. And other bombings, Paglin was the mastermind. And so now, Paglin is being brought to meet with Kahana to teach him bombcraft, to teach him and his henchmen how to build bombs. And then that information was then turned into, instruction manuals. The Jewish Defense League, they then, printed these instruction manuals where they explained how to make a Molotov cocktail and incendiary time bombs and booby traps. And they passed this knowledge on to the rest of the the followers of Kahana. So not only would they explain to them how to actually make the bombs, they would tell them who the targets should be. They would publish these lists of enemies of the Jews, so-called, people they determined to be the enemies. And in these texts, they would write, well, we cannot advocate any illegal activity. However, such groups have been the recipients of beatings and even a few bombings. Although we lose no sleep, we cannot tell people to do that. It's illegal. So in other words, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, you know what to do. We can't explicitly say, go kill these people, but here's the instructions of how to make a bomb, and here's the people we think deserve to be bombed. You do with it what you will. So they would publish these, and they would people would, in their name, go out and try to assassinate these people, including the U.S. ambassador the Soviet ambassador to the UN and the Soviet ambassador to the US. And they would, bomb cars, and they would bomb boats, and they would bomb bookstores and restaurants, and of course, cultural events too. Why cultural events? Because at that time, it's the middle of the Cold War. There's hardly any cultural communication between Americans and Soviets, but there were a few efforts to kind of bridge the gap between these peoples and kind of melt the ice. And so one of the American promoters who worked hardest to bring Soviet cultural productions to the United States was this man, Saul Hurok, an American impresario, happened to be Jewish. And because he did so, because he crossed the picket line that the Kahanists had established, because he refused to go along with their boycott, divest, sanctions program against Soviet Russia, so he was targeted as well. And so he's in his office in downtown New York City, and the office is bombed by the Kahanists. Of course, the office was gutted. Saul Hurok himself was injured. He survived, but one of his secretaries didn't. One of his secretaries was killed. Again, it's not necessarily relevant one way or another, but bears mentioning that that secretary happened to be Jewish as well. So they now have Jewish blood on their hands.